Hi, everyone, and welcome to Where's God podcast. In this podcast, we try to find God in movies, shows, books, and places where He's not obviously found. And in this podcast episode, we're finding God in the song Invisible String by Taylor Swift. So, yes, I am finally doing a song after I've said many times that this podcast finds God in songs. I finally am. And now I just need to do a book. So if you have any book suggestions, put it in the comments. I'm not the best at reading lately, but I think it would be fun to use a really good book. Even though I was an English major in college, I am really bad at poetry, and I struggled my way through it pretty bad. So I was a little hesitant to do songs because of that. But I had a professor when I took a creative writing class. He was really awesome. And there was a day where we were studying poetry and all the students were like, why can't they just be clear with what they're trying to say? Why don't they just say what they mean? Referring to poets. And the professor was like, I would argue that they are being really clear. They're being super clear, using metaphors and figurative language to bring across the meaning even better. They're not just saying it's cold out. They're using these description words and imagery to show you how cold it really feels. So I try to keep that in perspective, but luckily Taylor Swift's poem, her song Invisible String, isn't overly complex, so it's pretty easy to understand. And as I was analyzing the poem, I realized it was a lot different from the way I go about thinking about the movies and shows I do for this podcast, because for this song, I was analyzing it at a very micro level. I was looking at each line and I was looking at each word to understand the meaning. And that already made me think of God like He is on a very micro level of our lives. And He's helping us in the small details of our lives. Because just like poetry or songs, every word choice, punctuation mark choice, every chord in a song, every strum of the guitar helps contribute to the meaning of the poem. Just like every choice we make in our lives is contributing to who we are as people and contributing to the meaning of our lives and our progression and purpose. So I thought that was pretty cool that that's something that can make life beautiful. Sometimes life can be kind of mundane and boring, but if you think about every choice or every detail in our lives helps add meaning to our life, then life can be beautiful, and we can see how it all works together. And God sees how those details work together for our life. That's why He cares about the small things, even though we might not always think He does. So it's kind of cool to think we have the power to choose what our life is like, who we are, just like the author chooses the meaning of the poem or the song. So it was kind of fun that I found God without even thinking about what the song meant, So this is my favorite Taylor Swift song, and I did see her on the Eras tour, and I was really bummed out because this song was originally on her set list, for maybe the first couple legs of her tour, but then she broke up with her longtime boyfriend and she took this song off of her set list, probably because it reminded her too much of her ex-boyfriend. But that made me pretty mad because I was like, why are you gonna write such a good song and not be able to perform it? Maybe you should be able to perform every song no matter what it makes you think of. But anyways, I am doing a podcast about it, so it's still good. I still get to think about it and talk about it and hear it more. I would suggest that you listen to this song before, right now, or after the podcast. I love this song because of the music and also because of the meaning and the lyrics. So it's super peaceful, it's steady, it's consistent, it's predictable. Nothing comes out of nowhere. It's just like a very beautiful song. And that's kind of how I picture God's ways, like steady and he's sure and he fills us with peace. The song is about how the speaker of the poem was always connected to her love. They were always meant to be and meant to find each other, which to me is just a really sweet sentiment, thinking there's someone out there now who's going through life the same as me, but we'll meet someday when it's supposed to happen because we're tied together by this invisible string. Now, I was an English teacher, and when I would teach poetry, which again was a challenge, but luckily I taught it to middle schoolers. But I would ask the students to look for the rhyme scheme. What's the rhyme pattern? I would ask them to look for any repeated words or phrases, look for figurative language to help them find the deeper meaning. And usually, if a word or phrase is repeated in a poem or book or even a movie, it's really important. Like, just think about the scriptures, how many times Jesus is mentioned. That means he must be a pretty important man, right? Or how much God's goodness is mentioned, or how many times the scriptures say remember. So that helps us know like what's most important. Just like when you're studying a poem or a work of literature, if something's repeated, that points us to what the author's trying to bring about. So I'm going to ask you, because you've listened to the song now, what do you think is repeated in the song? Great answer. I think so too. One thing I think that's repeated a lot is colors. So for example, the very first line says, "Green was the color of the grass where I used to read at Centennial Park." She says, "Teal was the color of your shirt when you were 16 at a yogurt shop. Gold was the color of the leaves when I showed you around Centennial Park. Blues and purple pink skies." But there's one thing that doesn't have color. So we see these colors being brought up quite a lot in the song, but there's something that doesn't have color, and it's the string, the invisible string, tying her romantic partner to her. She couldn't see this string like she could see other things in her life. She says the line, "Isn't it just so pretty to think all along there was some invisible string tying you to me?" And I can compare that with God. It's not always easy to see God's hand in our life. He is that invisible string. In a talk I recently heard, the speaker described it as God's invisible hand guiding us, protecting us. So because we can't see God, we can't always see his hand in our lives, we have to have a lot more faith in his hand, in the invisible string, which isn't always easy to do because sometimes the world can be a lot more colorful, so to speak. We can always see the problems in our life. We see the temptations right in our face, but we have to trust in God's invisible hand, trust that he knows the right way, the right path for us, and is always guiding us in the right direction, pulling us towards the right way. In the song, it says the string pulls her out of all the wrong arms. It wraps all her past mistakes in barbed wire, chained her demons, and was wool to brave the seasons. So it's really cool that all of a sudden the string is becoming chains, it's becoming barbed wire, it's becoming wool. in these different instances where it helped her. And these are just, really great metaphors to compare to God's word and his hand in our lives. God can be that warmth, that wool to help brave us through the hard times, to give us comfort and safety and security through, Jesus Christ's atonement. Our mistakes are no more. And in the song, they're wrapped in barbed wire. They don't affect her anymore. Just like when we repent, our mistakes are erased. They don't affect us anymore if we don't let them. And it says chains around her, demons, and that's God giving us the strength to overcome our demons, those temptations or things that haunt us from our past. He chains them so we can break free from them. I just think that's a really super cool part of the song that we can compare to God's work in our lives. Now, switching gears, the whole song describes it as an invisible string, right? It doesn't have color. But then there's one line that describes it as a single thread of gold. All of a sudden, it's not invisible anymore, and it's now a thread. Why? And why is it now gold? Why that color? And I think when we think of gold, we think of precious, we think of treasure, we think of valuable. So now she's realizing that this string is what's most important to her, what's most valuable to her. She sees how this string has saved her, where it's brought her, and what it's brought her. She says, there were clues I couldn't see when the string was invisible, but looking back, she can see how it helped her. And we oftentimes look back at a struggle and see how God was there to help us. The people he sent for us, the tender mercies that aren't always visible at the time, just like, it's that invisible string, but looking back, you can just see that gold thread. You can see where God's hand touched our lives. And that's why for me, I wish I kept a journal better, because when I look back and read through my journal, I can see how much God helped me in my struggles. He brought peace to me through a song or a church meeting or a visit to the temple, or he brought hope through a stranger's kindness. I could see that gold thread. I could see his hand. It was visible when you look back, even though it's not always visible when you're going through those hard times. There's another line where she says, cold was the steel of my axe to grind for the boys who broke my heart. Now I send their babies presents. A couple lines later, hell was the journey, but it brought me heaven. Our journeys will look like hell sometimes, but it's not for nothing. It will bring us heaven. Our suffering will be for our good. The suffering will help shape us into better people if we let it. The suffering will help bring us closer to God if we let it. It will make us stronger and ready for the things God has in store for us next. So go listen to this song, and maybe you'll be able to see God in other ways where I didn't. If you do, comment below, let me know. I know there's plenty more to be found in this song, but I hope that you can recognize the thread of gold in your life and try hard to even recognize the thread of gold or God's hand in the struggle, and not just after the fact, to help you through. And I hope you can find God in your story.